We begin with individual Suburi practice. This is the first practice, Suburi 1. Second practice, stepping forward and cutting, stepping back and cutting. Third practice, cut and thrust, cut upward as you step back. Note to turn the blade of the bokken upward as you cut upward and step back. The fourth Suburi practice is changing hammi, cutting on the right side, cutting on the left side. The fifth practice is the practice of squatting deeply. Be sure to keep your back straight, your feet pointed outward, and your knees going out over your toes. This is very important to avoid injury to your knees. The sixth practice is a Suburi cut from a yokomen position. The sword cut is straight, but your body moves to a yokomen 45-degree angle on each side. Okay, this is the seventh Suburi practice, in which your body turns direction and you move to a gedan position with the sword as you step backward. The eighth practice, begin in a squatting position with the sword in gedan, moving again facing opposite direction, ending each time in a squatting position, and cutting in the middle in a squatting position as well. The ninth Suburi, cutting twice in Jodan, right side, right hanmi and left hanmi, and then cutting twice in gedan, again from right hanmi, then left hanmi. These cuts are yokomen cuts. The sword is angled slightly rather than coming straight. The 10th Suburi practice involves a wave-like motion of the bokken. This practice is designed to keep you in connection with a partner's blade in partnership practice. Is called Misogi no Ken or Shihogiri, 4-direction practice. The first practice is the most basic, simply cutting in each direction and turning. The second Shihogiri or 4-direction practice, you begin from gedan, from the sword down, cutting upward as you turn. Note, you cut on both sides in each direction, first from right gedan, then from left gedan. The foot moves with each cut. And next is basic suburi in sawari, in sitting posture. And next is suburi from a sawari posture, changing hammi. And next is a suburi in a sawari position, moving forward, right and left sides. This next series is a series of one-hand warm-up practices for sword. The first practice is ikkyo. At the end of each cut, the sword is absolutely perpendicular to the ground. The second practice is nikkyo. The sword ends facing directly forward. One involves the wrist, the elbow, and the shoulder in the nikkyo cut. The third practice is sankyo. The blade describes an arc beginning from the center of one's body in front of the forehead to gedan, cutting down slightly to the side. The fourth practice is yonkyo. The blade is raised in an upward spiral as your body turns to the right if the blade is in the right hand, to the left if you're holding the bokken in the left hand. The fifth practice is gokyo. The sword is brought low. The hilt connects to the hara. The next series are 4 basic suburi practices with partners. The first practice, both partners are motionless in right hammi. Practice number 2, partners are moving forward and back, cutting with each step forward. The other partner is cutting with each step backward. In the third practice, each partner cuts and thrusts. On the thrust, the blade is turned upward. After the thrust, the sword is raised with the blade upward and turned in the jodan position. Practice is a practice of irimi, of entering. Uke cuts with a straight shomen cut. Nage turns the hips to the side, enters and cuts. This practice is ura. Nage steps forward on the left foot, enters on the left side as uke cuts forward in a straight forward shomen cut. This practice is shochikubai, or triangle, circle, square. Nage begins with a thrust, stepping slightly to the left with the right foot, then turns the body, stepping forward on the left foot, the blade coming down in an arc, cutting over the top of uke's bokken. The third part is the square, in which partner cuts toward the throat. This next series of kumitachi exercises are ikkyo through yonkyo. For each of these, there are 3 variations, and each variation is done in omote and ura. We're practicing each variation 6 times. First slowly, then in each of the 5 rings of musashi, first in ground, then in wind, then in water, then fire, and then in void. The second practice is ikkyo omote, variation number 2. First slowly. Next in ground. Notice ground has a sense of down. It's important to feel one's feet on the mat in ground. Wind is a sense of up. Feel the top of your head as you move and cut. In water, feel your hips turning with each movement. Fire is forward, a sense of forward connection toward one's partner. And then finally, void or emptiness, there's a sense of all 6 directions, down and up, right and left, forward and back. Variation number 3 is a Gedan variation. Nage brings Uke's sword downward and Uke cuts toward the knee. Nage pivots slightly, drawing the right knee, the right foot back toward the left foot. Then responds by extending up toward Uke on their left-hand side, and then finishing as Uke covers toward that extension, finishing with a shomen cut on the right side. Next are the ikkyo ura versions. Variation number 1. In ura, the sword is held in chudan, or slightly dropped below that, almost a high gedan position, with the blade facing upward. Next is ikkyo ura variation number 2. Next is Ikkyo Ura, variation number 3. Next is Nikkyo Omote, variation number 1. In this practice, Uke cuts horizontally to try and beat Nage's blade on the side and knock it offline. As Uke's blade moves across, Nage's blade describes a half circle coming under the blade and coming up toward Uke's wrist. Nikkyo Omote, variation number 2. In this practice, both partners cut yokomen in jodan twice, then cut in gedan. After the first gedan cut, Uke raises and thrusts toward Nage's abdomen. Nage does a similar half circle coming under the thrusting blade and ending cutting the wrist of Uke. Next is Nikkyo Omote, variation number 3. Note that variation number 3 in all of these techniques, in variation number 3, Nage moves off the line at a 45-degree angle, moving off to the right. The next practice is Nikkyo Ura, variation number 1. In this practice, the sword is moved in very tight circles, first on the right side, then on the left side, mainly moving with the wrist. Next is Nikkyo Ura, variation number 2. Next is Nikkyo Ura, variation number 3. This next practice is Sankyo Omote, variation number 1. Nage cuts upward with the blade of the bokken facing up as Uke cuts downward. Sankyo Omote, variation number 2. In this practice, Nage moves slightly to the left, spiraling the bokken upward and toward the left, as Uke cuts, beginning a shomen cut, but diverting toward the wrist, toward the right wrist, which is open for a moment as Nage begins to move. Nage immediately spirals back to the right, stepping backward on the right foot, and then as Uke cuts a second time, Nage finishes by coming in on the right hand side. Sankyo Omote, variation number 3. In this, Nage moves to the right initially, begins by a slightly upward cut, and then immediately cutting back toward uke, forcing uke, in a sense, to parry that cut. Then immediately Nage goes onto the left side doing the same thing, drawing uke to the left, and then Nage finishes with a shomen cut on the right-hand side. Next is Sankyo Ura, variation number 1. In this practice, Nage begins by thrusting toward uke with the blade facing up, then immediately stepping back slightly, cutting upward as uke cuts down in a saburi cut. Sankyo Ura, variation number 2. This is essentially the same practice as Sankyo Omote, variation 2, except the beginning is with the blade held in Ura position, namely in Gedan or Chudan, beginning with a half thrust toward uke before spiraling up to the left. Sankyo Ura, variation number 3. This is the same practice as Omote, variation 3, except again the beginning is the Ura beginning. Next is Yonkyo Omote, variation number 1. As uke raises, intending to cut in a suburi cut, nage thrusts. Yonkyo Omote, variation number 2. Yonkyo Omote, variation number 3. Yonkyo Ura, variation number 1. Yonkyo Ura, variation number 2. Yonkyo Ura, variation number 3. Next are a series of tachidori or sword taking techniques. First is sword versus sword. The first technique is kokyu nage. Next is a variation of kokyu nage, entering on the other side. Next are sword versus empty hand techniques. First, ikkyo. Second, nikyo. Third is sankyo. Fourth is yonkyo. Next, kotegaishi. The next technique is shihonage. Next, kokyu nage. Irimi nage. And another variation on kokyu nage.